welcome to Temple Talk from the Temple Institute, Jerusalem, Israel. Rabbi Chaim and Richman here together with Yitzchak Reuven, and today, the 16th day of the month of Shvat, 5779. It's January 22nd, 2019, and this week is Shabbat, Parashat Yitro. Hope everyone had a very, very renewing, rejuvenating, refreshing Tu B'Shvat yesterday. And we all are feeling the rush.
Fruits. We're feeling the fruits of our
fruits
efforts.
of our fruits. We're feeling the life force regenerating and flowing through our veins as it is throughout the entire world. That's what Tu B'Shvat is all about. And speaking of the life force of the people of Israel is the Torah. And this week, Parashat Yitro, we come to a tremendous climax. We come to the Matan Torah, the revelation of Mount Sinai, the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai. It is probably, can be safely said to be the most important event in human history, the most important watershed event in human history, because it is the rendezvous of the divine and man. It is the meeting up of God with humanity. And Israel's code, the Torah, is not man-made. It comes from heaven. It was given by God. And the entire point of everything that we've been learning about throughout the book of Exodus, and in fact, since the very beginning of creation, is all about this moment. That's why we left Egypt. That's why we were in Egypt. That's what all the miracles of the Exodus were about. And it's really why Hashem created the world in the first place, was for the giving of the Torah. And here it is in Parashat Yitro. And the event is described by our sages as being so transformative, and it was the pinnacle of a certain type of knowledge based on experience, not just faith, but actual first-hand knowledge gained through experience. So that's something that is a pretty amazing idea that I hope to be speaking about in this week's video lesson. Parsha is named Yitro.
Yes, it is.
That is named after the father-in-law of Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe had quite an interesting life when you think about the fact that he was raised in the house of Pharaoh by Pharaoh's daughter, and then his father-in-law is Yitro. Can you tell us a little bit more about this elusive character, Jethro? Can you tell us, Yitzchak Reuven?
Oh, Yitro. We know a lot about Yitro. We know a lot al-pi midrash. We know a lot from the midrashic sources. We know that he's described in the Torah itself as Kohen Midian. That means he was a religious figure, a priest in Midian. And our midrash, our sages, fill that out, saying that he was the world expert on avodah zarah, on idol worship.
He was an idolatrous priest.
He was an idolatrous
that was his
priest,
background.
But he didn't simply focus on his own local
he was
cult.
no amateur. He was no dilettante.
He was the Google of the Google of avodah zarah. Any question you had about any type of idol worship anywhere in the world, you could go to Yitro.
Can we back up a little bit? Can you
Okay.
roll it back a little further back? Because there's a very tantalizingly evocative, paralyzingly, thrillingly powerful midrash that tells us that Yitro actually had been in the close inner circle of Pharaoh.
There is that midrash as well, that Yitro, along with two other biblical characters that you might be familiar with, Bilam, the heathen prophet, and Eov, Job,
The sufferer.
Were all three.
They were the advisors of Pharaoh.
In the inner cabinet of Pharaoh.
And when Pharaoh made his Nuremberg, no, it's not Nuremberg. What is the word? His Wanasi conference.
Yeah.
And he sat down with these advisors to discuss the Jewish problem. Let us come and deal wisely with this people. Each one had a different Eitzah, a different piece of advice.
A different response.
If
I recall correctly, not that I was there, but if I recall the Midrash correctly, Job was silent. He didn't know what to say. And he did not respond positively or negatively.
Exactly.
He was silent.
Bilam,
on the other hand, he's the one who came up with the genocidal plan.
Yes,
it was all his
He was
brain.
the architect of Pharaoh bathing in the blood of the Jewish babies.
And Yitro,
he
was
took
so
off.
horrified,
He took
fled.
off out of there.
Right.
He
said,
got right out of there. He said, "This
cannot
is
serve in
no
this
place
cabinet."
for me."
Right. He fled to Midian. And
That's what he was doing way out in Midian.
Right. And there, I guess he became the Kohen Midian.
So that right away, so again, his understanding, his awareness of God, his consciousness was not yet fully developed at all, because he still was totally plugged into the cacophony of the pantheon of gods. But he was a sensitive person. He was a real person.
He was a moral person.
He was a moral person.
And
which is something that we see in our Parashat now also that we'll be discussing. This in itself is a comment on the human condition. It's like, when you see evil, what do you do?
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes just being there makes you complicit.
And
he knew that he couldn't change things. He knew that he was not going to be able to have an effect on Pharaoh, but he wanted nothing to do with it.
And just to follow up on Job, this then, according to the Midrash, is the understanding of why he later would suffer so, because he had been silent when he could have responded and perhaps, done some good. He had been silent, so later on he suffered. And there's even more to that Midrash, but I don't think we'll get into that now. There's another Midrash about Yitro, which is the whole idea of the staff. The beautiful Midrash about the staff.
Right. So first of all, again, like you mentioned, he comes to Midian and he becomes this guru, really, of
he's the go-to
total
guy.
Connoisseur, go-to guy for spiritual experiences.
Yeah.
And there's a whole question amongst the sages about when exactly did this take place? When did he come to the desert to speak to Moshe? When did he make this statement? But he heard about the splitting of the sea and about the war with Amalek. Some say that it happened after the giving of the Torah, because there's no chronological order, and he heard about that as well. But he heard certainly about the splitting of the sea, the miracles of the Exodus, and the war with Amalek. And he said, and there's a verse here, which is an amazing verse here in the Parsha. He said, it's chapter 18, Jethro rejoiced over all the good that Hashem had done for Israel, that he had rescued it from the land of Egypt. Jethro said, "Blessed is Hashem, who has rescued you from the hand of Egypt and from the hand of Pharaoh, who has rescued the people from under the hand of Egypt. Now I know that Hashem is greater than all the gods, for in the very matter in which the Egyptians had conspired against them." So on that statement, very powerful statement, the Holy Zohar tells us that was a tremendous moment of the sanctification of Hashem's name, because Yitro was this super duper expert on all these false gods, on all the pagan deities, and all the mythical gods. And now he had a total transformative experience, and he understood that there's only one God whose name is one. He understood that Hashem is God. And so the difference between him saying something like this and someone else is a huge difference, because when he said, "Now I know that Hashem is God," the Zohar says that was a moment of tremendous illumination for the whole world, and it was like the greatest sanctification of Hashem's name, because when the person who's furthest away, when the person who, in other words, he should know he should know, because he was an expert in all these gods. And for him to say, now I know that God is God, that was a huge...
And he had his whole life invested in idol worship. So for him to say this also, it was a complete change of life for him, a complete, he threw it all on the line there. He understood, this is it. This is what is no longer. It's a whole new world for Yitro.
The story that you're referring to, the Midrash tells us that, I think it was the staff of Adam,
Yeah.
that somehow came down to Yitro. I don't know exactly
it was in Pharaoh's court, and Yitro took it with him when he left. When he fled, he took that staff. I forget how it got to Pharaoh's court, but it was in Pharaoh's possession, and Yitro took it.
And Yitro took it, and this may sound familiar to you, campers. It's a pretty amazing story, and it is the Midrash that Yitro took it and planted it basically in his front yard.
Yeah.
And he had this understanding that if someone can uproot it, that person will be Israel's redeemer.
Mm-hmm.
That person will be the spiritual master. And Moshe came, and he pulled it out of the ground, and that is the very
Didn't even
staff.
think twice, and that's the very staff that Moshe was commanded by God to use.
When he went back to Egypt.
All these different midrashim.
When he went back to Egypt, and he
Yes.
performed the miracles that he performed from the very beginning of the book of Egypt,
Right, all through the desert.
Shemot. And of course, this is the template story of Excalibur.
Yeah.
And King Arthur, and all of the stories, the traditions of the nations, the ones that have been retold and that and have become popular. It's because they contain an element of truth, and they come from the supernal truth. They come from the collective consciousness of human experience, and this is the true story according to Chazal, according to our sages, of the staff of Moshe, and this is its parallel account in the legend of King Arthur.
What all these stories point to, and what the Torah itself testifies, is that Yitro was not just happenstance. He didn't just happen to be there. He obviously had a very significant role in the development of things, and I would suggest that he had a very significant role in Moshe's growing consciousness. While when he left Egypt, he was a kid. He was a callow kid. He had killed an Egyptian. He fled for his life, and then he has this spiritual awakening while he's living at the house of Yitro. When he goes back to Yitro after the burning bush and getting the commandment by God to go back and redeem his people, he goes back to Yitro to say, I'm leaving, and Yitro says, go, my son, go do it. This is practically says, this is what you were born for.
Right.
I mean, maybe he's a father-in-law saying, oh, finally, he's getting out of the house. I don't know. But it seems to me that Yitro really was an amazing individual. And again, there's more evidence in the few verses that we read about him in this week's Parashat, Yitro. Again, that he arrives and that Moshe comes to meet him and bows, and they ask, and they greet each other, and then he and Moshe and Aaron and the elders, he brings offerings, and they sit down for a meal. It's a very, very special reception that he receives. I mean, he was a very important person.
And the very fact that the Torah portion, which contains Matan Torah, the revelation at Mount Sinai, and the giving of the Torah from heaven to the people of Israel, is named after Yitro, is an incredible testimony.
Named after Yitro, former high priest of idol worship, is very, very amazing. There's another thing that we'll talk about the fact that when he saw Moshe sitting by himself and the entire people lined up he was acting as judge for the entire nation. And so from morning to night, he was alone, and people would come up with their problems and their difficulties.
And this is before the Torah was given, and yet
Right.
Moshe had the understanding and the knowledge of what Hashem's will be in these.
And Yitro sees this, and he says to Moshe, this won't work. You can't do this alone. You have to create a
system
judicial
a system of delegation.
Basically, a Sanhedrin. This was Yitro's inspiration. There's something very interesting, Rabbi, that I noticed this year reading the Parashat. I always notice something that you didn't notice before. His wording is very interesting. I don't know what to make of this, but I'm just going to throw it out there. It might mean nothing. But I just want to point out that it says, וירחותן משה את כל אשר הוא עושה לעם, ויאמר מה הדבר הזה אשר אתה עושה לעם, מדוע אתה יושב לבדך וכל העם ניצב עליך מן בוקר עד ערב. And it says that the father-in-law of Moshe saw all that Moshe was doing for his people, and he said, what is this thing that you're doing? Why are you sitting alone all day? Why are you sitting alone? And the entire nation is standing before you, to bring their cases before you from morning till night. And Moshe tells him that he's the judge, he's the only one. And then he says, "Vayomer choten Moshe elav lo tov hadavar asher ata oseh." The father-in-law of Moshe says to Moshe, it's not good what you're doing. And I just discovered this, Rabbi. Call me crazy, but he notices that Moshe's all alone, right? Are you with me? Notices he's all alone, and he says, not good that you're all alone. Last time we heard that expression, not good, that man's all alone, is in the Garden of Eden. Before God even created Eve, he said, it's not good that man's alone. And here, it's almost the exact same phrasing. It's not good, Moshe, that you're alone, and therefore you need to train and appoint other judges. Again, this is a new idea that's crawling around in my mind right now. I don't know what to make of it, what it's suggesting, but other than the fact that I think it's suggesting that Yitro is a very, very holy person. Beyond that, I'm not prepared to say anything yet.
Well, when you formulate this more in your mind, get back to us and tell us what you think.
I will. So, Yitro.
So this advice, there's a whole question. I mean, is this something that he really innovated completely? Was Moshe not aware of this kind of idea? So the juxtaposition of this whole section of the establishment of the judicial system before the Torah is given is it's very important as a basic principle and basic tool of wisdom even before the Torah could be given. And of course, the very big difference between this judicial system that's being described here and the modern judicial system. Mm-hmm. Because first of all, we're talking about a system of delegated authority, right, for the education of disputes. But the top of the pyramid here is Hashem himself. and then like he said, okay, you be a representative to God, and you convey the matters to God. You shall caution them regarding the decrees and the teachings, and you shall make known to them the path in which they should go and the deeds that they should do. And then you shall discern from among the entire people men of accomplishment, God-fearing people, men of truth, people who despise money, and you shall appoint them leaders of thousands, leaders of hundreds, leaders of 50s, and leaders of 10s. They shall judge the people at all times, and the cases that they can't handle, they'll bring to you. So the top of the pyramid is Hashem himself, because the wisdom is emanating from the divine system of knowledge. It's going to be emanating from the Torah, and Moshe is working opposite Hashem. And then this is how the information is filtering down. It's the opposite of when the information is when the education, the decisions, the judgments are the product of human intellect. And again, this is exactly the singularity of our relationship with the Torah. People talk about the role of religion in society. People have the impression that people who follow halakha, people who try to follow Hashem's way, that there's a lot of coercion, and that it's very heavy, very heavy-handed. But it's not for naught that the sages of Israel liken the event of the revelation at Sinai to a wedding, and the Torah itself to the ketubah, to the marriage contract between bride and groom. And in fact, there are verses in the Song of Songs that compare this to a wedding day. And it's not like this is what you have to do. It's like, I love you, and I want you to know what is my ratzon for you, what is my will for you, what is my desire for you in this world. It's a completely different headspace. And so when the contemporary judiciary is based on ego, hubris, political activism, agenda, and the manipulation of people to fulfill a certain expectation that those in power have, that is like the exact, that is like the definition of human suffering, first of all. And it's interesting that the Rambam in his great work Mishnah Torah explains that one of the functions of the Sanhedrin, which is a court of justice based on the Torah, is to rescue those that are being exploited. And basically anybody who is a victim of the judicial system today feels that they're being exploited, So and I speak on the background of the fact that there's happens to be a judicial scandal at the moment rocking the society in Israel, which unfortunately you and I know more about than some other people because of information that reached us, and it's all very, very disappointing. And look at these verses about what judges are supposed to be. May you be a representative to God. And then the list for requirements for the delegation are men of accomplishment, God-fearing people, men of truth, people who despise money. It's like these are the people who have to be the judges, because the judgment is based on not only on knowledge of Hashem's will, but on reflecting His essence in your behavior as well. Wow. This is a prerequisite for the giving of the Torah. This preceded the revelation at Sinai, so we have a lot to learn from.
And this is one reason why, or maybe the reason why, one of the appellations for a judge in Hebrew and Torah is Elohim, is God. Not that they're God, but they need to behave themselves.
But they stand in judgment
fashion.
as a reflection of what Hashem's will would be according to His word. Believe it or not, I hear the music, but we will be right back here today on the 16th day of the month of Shvat, 5779. Be right back. Temple Talk.
Shalom and welcome back to Temple Talk. This is Yitzchak Reuven with my friend Rabbi Chaim Richman here in the holy city of Jerusalem, Israel. Today is the 16th day of the month of Shvat, 5779, January 22nd, 2019. This week's Parashat is Parashat Yitro, the Torah portion in which the Ten Commandments are gifted to Israel at Mount Sinai. Rabbi, something I want to say, and I say this every year. It's just part of this parsha that I just can't get over. It's so beautiful to me. After the incredible giving of Torah at Mount Sinai, with the voices that we see, and the trumpet sound, and the sound of the shofar, and the fire and the smoke on the mountain, and the people keep their distance, and Moshe goes up and God's voice speaks to the people, etc., and it's all incredibly beautiful. And like you said, it is not just beautiful, but it's the paramount moment in human history. And then immediately following the final of the Ten Commandments, immediately following, God speaks to Moshe, and he says, build for me an altar out of earth, right? And if you build it out of stone, make sure that you don't use
an altar of earth shall you make for me. It's verse 21 of chapter 20. And you shall slaughter near it your burnt offerings and your peace offerings, your flock and your herd. Wherever I permit my name to be mentioned, I shall come to you and bless you. And when you make for me an altar of stones, do not build them hewn, for you will have raised your sword over it and desecrated it.
Yes, that's the one. And I'm always just so touched by the fact that following this incredible presentation of these 10 commandments that are life-changing, humanity-changing, history-changing, that are become the DNA of all that we are, is the 11th commandment, which is build for me an altar and make offerings, which, you know, a very good friend of mine recently recommended to watch a TV show on Netflix. I forget the name of the show, and I forget the name of the person who does the show, but it's about tidying up your house.
I think it might be called Tiny Houses.
Tidy houses?
I think it's
Okay.
a Japanese lady.
Yes. So this very beautiful, sweet Japanese lady is invited into houses of people who have accumulated messes for whatever reasons, and she helps them to restore order in their house. And one of the processes that she teaches is, you know, take all your clothes and put them on your bed and go through one thing at a time, or whatever the article is, whether it's clothing or a knickknack or whatever, hold it in your hands, right? And determine, get a feeling whether it presents you with a spark of joy, I think is her words, or not. And it occurred to me when I watched this last week that the altar for God is a spark of joy. And spark of joy is a beautiful translation of reach nichoach, which is, you know, the sweet savor. It's a spark of joy for God. And why is it a spark of joy for God? Because the altar and offerings are man's initiative, and that's what is joyful for God, that man reaches out to God. And again, from Adam through Cain and Abel, through Noah, through Abraham, etc., man has been building altars and making offerings to God, and that brings God a spark of joy. The other aspect of that same show that I think is also relevant is that the people, as they're going through their things, you know, they take out things that they've had in their house maybe for 30, 40, 50 years. Some things they didn't even know they had. But, and then they, you know, if it's something that they've forgotten they had, but then they hold it and they look at it and it brings back, you know, a memory, it gives them happiness, you know, so they keep it. And I'm thinking for the Jewish people, for Am Yisrael, it's the same thing with an altar and with offerings. This is something that, you know, it's been in our attic for many, many centuries because we were in exile. We couldn't make offerings, and so we kind of have emotionally put it in the attic and stored it away, and many people feel disconnected to it or have forgotten about it, forgotten that it's really part of our possessions as
like
a people.
you said, the Torah is in our DNA, and the history of the temple offerings just really is so close to the surface within the collective consciousness of Israel, and just really needs to be
needs
to be activated.
to touch.
One of the secrets of this beautiful verse, before the giving of the Torah in chapter 19, when the nation arrived at Sinai, and God said to Moshe, tell the people, so shall you say to the house of Jacob and relate to the children of Israel, you have seen what I did to Egypt, and how I have borne you on the wings of eagles and brought you to me. And now, if you hearken well to me and observe my covenant, you shall be to me the most beloved treasure of all peoples. For mine is the entire world. You shall be for me a kingdom of ministers and a holy nation. These are the words that you shall speak to the children of Israel. And so that the calling, again, just as the Torah is divine, and the top of the pyramid is Hashem himself, and the Torah is divine, and it's such a different headspace and a different commitment and a different structure than that of any other people, because this is coming from Hashem himself. So too, we have a calling, we have an offering, BDS or not BDS, you know, and anti-Semitism or not anti-Semitism, or this is actually what anti-Semitism comes from. It's because this is what we're supposed to be doing. We have a calling, and the calling is to bring the whole world to God consciousness. Whether or not we're doing that is a different issue. I think we are. I think we always are, on some level. And it's that this is the structure of the DNA.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the world's reaction to it, you know.
Meaning
that the incredible resurgence of anti-Semitism all over the world is a reaction to the singularity of Israel and the fact that we have this program that we are supposed to be bringing people to the realization that Hashem is God.
Yeah, and with the increase in anti-Semitism, there's also the opposite side of the coin, tremendous international support among individuals, some nations.
At least in
the state of
Chad.
Israel. Chad is perhaps not the finest example of a nation that supports Israel, but...
I'm just referring to Netanyahu's latest diplomatic
gambit?
accomplishment. Really.
Yes, renewed diplomatic relations with Chad.
My take on your concept of the 11th commandment, your concept of the altar of earth, right? My take has always been that the amazing conclusion to Parashat Yitro, when after all, again, the description of what took place at the Sinai Revelation is so earth-shattering and so totally consciousness bending, and then the heavens opened and the whole nation perceived the unique oneness of God with this tremendous prophetic clarity. It was the highest level of prophecy possible for people to attain this incredible bond that the nation felt with Hashem. So the reaction of a person might be like, how could I possibly serve such a God? How could I possibly follow this up? How could I possibly do justice to Hashem? And
it's a beautiful idea, but how do I incorporate this into my life?
Right. In other words, that's one thing. It's one thing for it to be, but it's so ethereal and it's so incredibly majestic, and I'm such a puny, sniveling human being. How can I serve this God? And Hashem is saying, wait, I thought you might say that. Actually, all I require is an altar of earth and an altar of stones. And it's so simple and it's so earthy, because the beautiful thing that the verse is emphasizing is that Hashem is saying, you might think that the only way to serve me is with something absolutely, like palatial, absolutely celestial, absolutely, so reflective of the honor due me as being infinite. But no, I love this earth, I love this world, and that's why I gave the Torah to this world. That's why I brought it down from heaven, because this world is what matters. And that, by the way, my friend, is the bottom line of the whole Jewish experience, the whole Torah consciousness, the whole idea of what it means to be a Jew. It's about this world, about improving this world, improving ourselves to make ourselves into better people. It's about action. And when we talked earlier about the fact, you said this beautiful idea of how the Torah is in our DNA. And we keep talking about how the Sinai experience, the giving of the Torah, was so revelatory. It's called the Revelation, by the way. And it was so absolutely the most, important event in human history. Why? Why was it so important? Because, again, this bottom line on one foot, this is the whole meaning of the Torah's message, of the centrality and the importance of living a life in this world as we are, as human beings. This is who we are, and this Hashem's message to us is that we have to strive to be better people. That's what the Torah is all about. That's what the whole code is all about. But the very fact, opening the heart in the deepest way, that Hashem gave the Torah to Israel on behalf of mankind, and that he bequeathed it to this world, shows how much he loves this world, and shows how much this world is at the center of everything. But this is what it all boils down to: is does a person accept this or not? Is it like one of the, and I want to speak about this more in our video presentation this week, hopefully. One of the major issues that people have is, well, is the Torah of divine origin or not? Mm-hmm. Is it a divine origin or not? And when they ask that, they're asking, and when scoffers and disbelievers talk about that in a cynical way, they really mean more than that. They don't just mean is the Torah of divine origin. They mean, does Hashem really care about this world? And I think I might say this every year in Parashat Yitro, but it's a very important concept. I think I might have mentioned this. Maimonides wrote very adulatingly, adoringly about Aristotle.
Mm-hmm.
And Maimonides, as a great intellect, as the intellectual that he was, as the wise person that he was, respected wisdom, very, very much respected learning, respected the human intelligence, and he wrote in glowing terms, expressing really like an intellectual, a certain love for Aristotle. And then he asks in his great work, Guide for the Perplexed, he asks if this is the case that Aristotle had such a great mind. I think he might even say that he had the greatest mind of anyone that he was familiar with from his writings. He said, if this is the case, how come Aristotle was kofer be'ikar? You know what that means, right. Kofer be'ikar. It means, how come he denied the existence of God if he was so great and he had such a perfect mind? Why didn't he come to this conclusion on his own? And Maimonides answers his own question. He says, because he was missing the concept of the Sinai Revelation. Because he was missing the concept of the giving of the Torah on Sinai. That's why he actually was an apostate. Even though he had such a great intellect, he missed everything, and he missed the boat altogether because he didn't even believe in God. But this is the place here. Open up your heart in the deepest way. When the Rambam says that Aristotle was missing the concept of the giving of the Torah, is your heart open? Okay. He doesn't mean the event.
He wasn't in school that day.
Right. He doesn't mean the event. He doesn't mean that it happened. He doesn't mean, this is a very interesting way of speaking, what he's saying here. He's revealing a deep secret. He doesn't mean that he doesn't know that it didn't happen, like he didn't read the entry in the encyclopedia. He means that he did not subscribe to the notion that God would meet up with man in this world, that he would, as it were, appear, descend, reveal, and give over of himself, of the divinity, with a plan, a program for the betterment, the ultimate redemption, the perfection of humanity, because that's what he means. He was missing the revelation. It means that he doesn't think that there could be a God that could be so earth-centered. But just like you pointed out so beautifully, the climax, the crescendo of this parsha, which so demonstrates God's earth-centeredness because of the giving of the Torah, is take stones and earth and make for me an altar. It's all about an expression of this world, of you standing with your feet planted firmly on this world and reaching out to me, just like I came and reached out to you. It's like this symbiotic relationship going from both ends of the spectrum at the same time.
And after all, Adam, man, and Adamah, earth, are the same. We are the ultimate expression of the earthiness of creation, which is why we become God's partner, and the altar of earth is just an outgrowth of an expression of our reaching out toward God.
And so Parashat Yitro, really, bottom line, is the ultimate expression of God's love for humanity.
Like you said, it's the wedding, it's the chuppah, it's the wedding celebration.
Because it's not about religious coercion. It's not about you. This is what you have to do. This is what you must do, or you get zapped. It's that this is what I have for you, my love. This is what I have for you, my love. Now, the program is beginning. The program that we have been sensing, that's been the underlying thread of the Genesis creation narrative and the saga of the forefathers and their descent to Egypt and the years of repression and subjugation and the exodus from Egypt. It's all happening now with this wedding. And now, as you know, well nigh the rest of the Torah is going to be taken up with the building of a home for this new couple, as it were, Israel and God in this world, which is the Holy Temple, and everything from now is going to change into the God on earth centered consciousness that is expressed by the building of the Holy Temple and the mitzvot that are observed there, and the knowledge of God streaming to the whole world from the Holy Temple. And here again, this is the first indication that we see of that here. Again, this verse in chapter 19, if you hearken well to me and observe my covenant, you shall be to me the most beloved churches of all people, for mine is the entire world. You shall be to me a kingdom of ministers and a holy nation. And the words in Hebrew, of course, are Mamlechet Kohanim v'Goy Kadosh. Mamlechet Kohanim, a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. And the idea being that just as the Kohanim, the lineal descendants of Aaron, are the priests in the Holy Temple, through whom the divine blessing is brought to the whole world, so too Israel has the same role to the entire world. What the Kohen is to Israel, Israel is to the world. And the verse is telling us right here that Israel is the kingdom of priests. But that's not just, again, like I like to say, like a frequent flyer thing, like a perk. Mm-hmm. That's not just like it's just like a club, a clubhouse. No, that's a responsibility and an obligation to assume responsibility for the betterment of mankind.
And Israel's response was, I do.
Not only was Israel's response, I do, but Israel's response was cataclysmically,
if you want me to, yeah.
It was so powerful that it absolutely transcends human understanding. It was naaseh v'nishma. This is after, as the Midrash tells us, that God actually offered the Torah to the whole world, and nobody wanted it. This is a very, very well-told, famous Midrash, that God went over to all the nations, just said, nobody should be able to say, why didn't you pick me? He offered the Torah, and each one, according to his particular innate DNA characteristics of what they get off of on in this world, each nation said, well, what does it say? And God said to each nation that very thing which they would have a problem with. To one nation, he said, well, it says don't steal. To another nation,
you can't do that.
He said, well, you can't be promiscuous, whatever it was. And each nation said, sorry, that doesn't interest me. And when it came to Israel, Israel didn't ask what it says.
They said,
open up your heart in the deepest way. This is the deepest thing in the world.
Later.
Israel didn't ask what it says. Israel just said, we will do and we will obey. But in Hebrew, naaseh v'nishma, it doesn't just mean we will obey. It means we will do before we understand. We will do no matter, even if we do not understand, we will do. We commit ourselves to do. We make the pledge to do. And then we will attempt to understand. But that tremendous leap of faith, that tremendous preparedness, and there's so much written about this secret that as our sages say, the angels said, who this is their style, and God said, who revealed to my children that this is the secret formula of serving me? So this is a powerful statement of, again, of faith and a transcending knowledge, and this connection of bringing this godliness into the world.
And bear that in mind as we progress in our odyssey through the desert, and the nation of Israel has its complaints and has its failings, that those complaints and failings do not contradict the naaseh v'nishma. It doesn't contradict that we'll do it and we'll understand later. It's simply part of the human experience, that we are human and we have our failings, but the commitment is rock solid, or earth solid, if you prefer.
And that response mechanism, the fact that Israel was able to transcend and to answer as one man, we will do and we will obey.
It says it all.
It's in our DNA.
Yeah, it's an eternal commitment.
And it's just there waiting to be revealed, even amongst those that feel themselves to be disenfranchised. No one is. And not only that, but the beautiful idea is that even when a person feels far from Hashem and a person asks, where is God, where is God, where is God? That's the person who is closest to God, really, because doubt is not a sign of a lack of faith. Doubt is a sign of a deep, burning desire to feel close to Hashem. And that is a beautiful idea, that there's nothing untoward about a person who's looking for God, because it's this tremendously deep motivation of wanting to feel that deeply.
So, in the previous Parashat last week, when the children of Israel asked, "Is God bekerbenu or ayin? Is God amongst us or not?" They weren't expressing skepticism or distancing. They were expressing, as you just said, a yearning desire for God to be firmly amongst them and present in their minds and in their lives. And this revelation at Sinai is the institution, is the beginning of that on a permanent 24/7 basis for the nation of Israel. God is always in our midst, and in fact, that holy temple that we will be instructed to build is so that God can dwell in our midst. That's the bottom line. Here's the
Thanks
music.
for being with us.
Thanks for being with us. Temple Talk.